Hello, everyone. This is the Unabated podcast. My name is Gina Fiore, and in this episode, I talk to Professor Harry Crane about political prediction markets, how big the markets are, what affects them, and if it's worth betting on elections when you have to lock your money up for months waiting on a resolution. I learned new ways to think about betting on politics, and I hope you do too. Please enjoy this discussion with Harry Crane.
That's a new word, unabated. That's the biggest word I know.
Hi, I'm Gina, and today I'm talking to Harry Crane. He has a PhD in statistics and he's heavily knowledgeable about political markets. So that's what I wanted to talk to him about today. Hi, Harry.
Hi, how you doing, Gina?
Hey, good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for talking to me. Um, so betting politics, like that's not something that I'm really familiar with. And I know a lot of people watching or listening might not know how it works, like PredictIt, how that site works. Can you just give us a quick like PredictIt 101, how that works, trading on PredictIt?
Yeah, I'll give you the specifics about PredictIt. There's other places to bet on politics. Probably if you wanted to actually bet on politics, you'd probably prefer other places if you're trying to make money. But anyway, PredictIt is the one is the market that's technically the only market that's open to US people, US citizens, although there's ways around that. PredictIt's an exchange, so it's just like any other betting exchange in some sense that you go on, you want to bet on a side. You can bet yes or no. So it's like back and lay for those familiar with Betfair. So for each possible outcome in politics, if you're talking about the presidential election, Trump, Harris, you can go yes or no on either. So yes, 45 cents for Trump would mean that you're paying 45 cents and these contracts, you're paying 45 cents for a contract, which will either become worth $1 if Trump wins or zero if he loses. And if you bet the no, it's the opposite. The no becomes worth $1 if he loses and zero if he wins. So that's I think pretty much the way it works. That's pretty much the nuts and bolts of it. That pretty much goes for most exchanges are similar. There's some quirks, some differences between them. There's commissions. In PredictIt, it's a 10% commission on
Wow.
on each profitable trade, not net market, which is a difference to Betfair. Betfair has a 2% commission and is net market. And they also have an 800. Well, the biggest thing I think, which is they have an $850 limit per market per person. So the most that you can actually bet on any given market is $850. They also have a 5,000 person cap in how many people can participate in a given market. Sometimes that becomes relevant. Not in most markets it doesn't, but in ones like presidential, it does.
Mm.
And they also charge 5% to withdraw your money. So that's PredictIt.
Wow. Yeah, you said Betfair charges 2%
Commission
commission, right?
on trade. I don't, as far as I'm aware, they don't charge anything to take money out.
Yeah, I think Sport Trade in New Jersey charges about 2% commission. Wow. So the market isn't that big, but what is it like? What is it Betfair? Do you know how big the market is in Betfair?
This year so far, over $100 million have been bet on the election.
Wow.
And there's other markets that are smaller, but so I haven't checked in a few weeks, but I think 30 million was bet on vice president on the nominee markets ended up being really big this year, particularly the Democrat. So
Hmm.
that probably got a lot bigger. I hadn't checked in a while, but as of a month or a month and a half ago, that was already probably over 30 million.
How,
Vice presidential markets, they got big this year because Harris was expected to be, and then everything kind of got thrown out. So
mhm.
uh,
How,
Polymarket, another market, they're over 700 million this year.
sorry, what is it called?
Polymarket is a crypto market.
Oh, okay.
They have over 700 million traded on the presidential election this year.
Wow. Are the prices
Brings them up.
swinging a lot? Are the prices swinging a lot with when polls come out?
No, they've been pretty much the same. The markets the prices have been about the same, more within a couple percent for
Mm.
the past couple of weeks. They were swinging a lot back in July when there was a lot of things going on, right?
Mm,
The assassination, the Biden getting out of there, and other things. Individual polls don't really swing it that much. I think groups of polls that are very surprising coming out around the same time will cause a shift of a few percent, and you'll notice that.
mm,
But I think that's the thing that I think that's one of the for those who there's different ways to use these markets. One is to participate in them and try to bet to try to make money.
mm,
We can talk about that. I think for most people, there's better ways to make money out there in betting, but
mhm,
it is something that can be done. But looking at these prices to try to get a sense of what's going on, I think is it's something that a lot of people are interested in around this time, every 2 to 4 years around this time. Um, and that's one thing that the markets I think are good at, or at least that's what they're supposed to be good at, is they don't overreact to individual piece of information, like a poll or an endorsement.
mm,
For example, the RFK endorsement the other day. I guess it's debatable because there's a lot of things going on at the same time, so it's
mm,
debatable what a given movement is caused by. There was a movement towards Trump before the endorsement, and then when the endorsement happened, actually Trump lost points. But that's also not so uncommon in betting markets or in markets of any kind where the buy the rumor, sell the news type of
mm.
thing, where the pricing actually adjusts well in advance of the event, and then the event there's a bit of a letdown, and the prices kind of settle down. But so that's kind of what's been happening lately, and the prices right now are pretty much right at 50-50.
So you might not have the answer, but are there arbitrage opportunities close to the election? I
Uh,
mean, ever.
oh yeah, there are. I mean, again, it depends what. Okay, so right now, if you were to look at PredictIt
Mm,
versus Betfair, there's technically an arbitrage opportunity because PredictIt is a huge outlier in pricing of the markets and the bookmakers. And for whatever reason has tended to be skewed the most towards the Democrat Harris or Biden in this election and in previous elections actually. But it's significant enough that it does present an arbitrage. I think even after you account for the commissions and fees and all that, I mean, it
oh
probably eats
wow.
at it quite a bit. But number one is that it's an $850 limit there, so the most you can arbitrage, 850 on each side, more or less, is worth a couple dollars, 1 or 2%. Um, Two would be that even if it was a true arbitrage, is it actually worth 2% for something that's going to settle in 4 months? I would argue no, but different people have different opinions on that. And then three is that it's very hard to find a true arbitrage in political markets because the rules are technically slightly different sometimes. So one of the things that the savvy political bettors are expert at is reading the rules, which is true of sports betting too. That
Yeah.
sometimes it's much more obvious in sports betting what it means to bet a money line for the most part than
Mm,
in politics where, for example, in an election, one market might say we're basing our decision off of what the AP reports as the winner. Another might say we're basing it off of a consensus of the AP, Fox News, CNN, blah, blah, blah. And another might say we're waiting until January 20th and whoever gets sworn into office is the person who won the election. Well, those are not always necessarily the same thing, especially when you compare the person getting sworn in to the person who was reported as having won,
mhm,
because there could easily be a dispute where a newspaper, and this happened in 2000. I mean, it came close to happening maybe in 2020, but it did. I don't think it did. There were any disputes about that where a news outlet thinks somebody won, they say they won, and then they didn't. They take that back, and obviously, the news doesn't have anything to do with who actually ends up winning, but it could have to do with who technically resolves the market according to
yeah.
the market. So you do have to be a bit careful about that. It
I
needs
uh I I mean I make my living as a gambler, right? But I feel like half of my work is reading terms and conditions. It's like admin and reading rules is like half of my job. I feel like, yeah, that
I think
makes
that. that's where a lot of edge can be found in politics. There was something, a few years ago, I remember it was on PredictIt where the market was how many Republican senators will there be on, the start of the new Congress. And, if you just kind of naively watch the news, 53 Republicans won a seat, so it was 53.
Hmm.
But and 53 was like around 60 or 70% even after this news came out. Well, why? Um, well, because if you read the rules, it said, on January 5th, when the Congress starts, how many Republicans will be sworn in. And technically one of them, his name's Charlie Crist. He was the governor of Florida. Now he's I think, a senator of Florida. He was the governor at the time, and he was going to have to step down from his seat as governor and then get sworn in, but he wasn't going to get sworn in until January 6th.
Hmm.
So on January 5th, there were only 52 Republicans. So the people who read the rules and really, internalized them were able to cash in on that. The people who didn't lost. So
I love
it
that.
really, it really does, matter. Yeah.
Is there a market for live betting? I remember Trump versus Clinton. I was watching the results coming in, and it looked like Trump was going to win, and I could still get plus 220 offshore. Like, is there a lot of trading as the results are coming in?
Oh yeah, there's a huge amount of training, but I guess one of the things I was gonna say here about well, there's a huge amount of training on election night,
Mm.
but well, that's kind of a given because people are seeing results come in, they're interpreting them, and there's kind of big adjustments when you see a big big vote
Hmm.
movement. Um, but one of the differences I was going to say politics to sports, and I think there's huge differences. At least the way that I typically approach these things, is the way I would think about it. All of political betting is in play betting because if you think about it, there's one event every basically think of it as there's one event every 4 years, but the event's going on for 2 years. And the reality is you don't bet on Trump 2 years ago and sit on it. I mean, there's people who
Hmm.
do that, but that's not really a way to make this work out, right? And if you look at it, actually, it turns out this year, I would say the vast majority of the money that has been made or lost that will be made or lost in this election has already been made or lost in the month of July this year because there was so much activity in that month that it's quite likely that there won't be much. There could be, there could be stuff happen in September, October, November, but it's the kind of thing where the way that the betting goes, I think the trading in and out, the live trading is much more important, and I think is much more a part of the professional trader's game in politics than it might be in sports. Obviously, there's people in sports who are doing in play, but there's many different ways to do sports. I think in politics that has to be a part of the strategy.
That's such a good point that the entire time you're just live betting. Like, I didn't think about it like that, but yeah, that's exactly right. That I like that you said that. Thinking about betting politics, that I was thinking about how it's similar, probably closest to betting like college basketball or college football because you don't have as much data on the players because the players change every year. And so sharp bettors will find inefficiencies betting college sports. Anything, is there anything similar in finding inefficiencies betting politics that you could find betting college sports? Or is that just too much of a jump?
I mean, I think that you're onto something. I mean, I still think they're in a completely opposite, totally different universes when
Yeah.
it comes to the lack of information that you have in politics. I mean, yeah, I think the closest you can come up with is probably something like college sports, but in reality, those players are going to play. Let's say those players play, 5 games at the beginning of the season. Well, you now
Mm.
know a little bit about them.
Right,
It's not
right.
like you don't know anything about them. It's a lot less than you would know about a professional player, at 20 years in the league.
Mm.
But, with politics, so much, I mean, the candidates isn't what matters. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. I mean, what matters is what determines the outcome is obviously the vote. And, I wonder how much well, one thing is I wonder how much, the trading in and out really when you're trading in July or in August, you're not necessarily trading on who's going to win the election. You're trading on, where the price is going to move. You could, maybe that's always what you're doing in sports betting, but there's this concept of closing line value in sports betting. But again, like I said, I don't think that, the way that I've approached politics, and this is not my main area at all in
Hmm.
terms of betting. The way I view it is it's not really a systematic way for me to make money.
Hmm.
Um, it's more of an opportunistic thing. So opportunities may present themselves, and when they do, you need to be ready for them. But you can't count on where or when or how, right? And I'm sure you can probably come up with examples from your life where you don't know when you're going to walk into the thing that
Yeah.
you walk into. I think that that's much more, for me, that's much more where politics is. It's not a major part of my a part of what I generally am doing day to day, but I do want to be ready in case an opportunity presents itself because the opportunities can be significant. I think those tend to be on along the lines of it's not because, a poll came out that had Harris 5 points ahead. Everybody sees that. Everybody can kind of analyze that, and you can maybe analyze it slightly better than everybody else and get a 1% or 2% advantage. That's not really where it is, but
Hmm.
information asymmetry is big in politics. Information asymmetry is big in college basketball and college sports, but information asymmetry is really big in
Yeah.
politics.
So you just said something that completely flipped what I was thinking. We're not betting on the candidates, we're betting on the voters. So there is actually a lot more data with like how Texas votes or something like that. So yeah, I was thinking about it completely wrong. I was thinking about the candidates. We didn't have a lot of data on them, but it's actually the voters who we have more data on. You just taught me something. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I would say that's probably where, I mean, that idea there, I think is where a source of edge comes
Hmm.
in these markets because I mean, you're not really betting against the if you're taking this anything seriously, you're not betting against the recreational bettors. You're betting against the 1% or less of
Hmm.
professionals. But think about why opportunity exists in politics because I think the vast majority of people say, "Oh, of course, I love Trump and Trump's going to
Hmm.
win."
Hmm.
It has nothing to do with that, right? It has nothing to
Yeah.
do with what your opinion is, number one, and it has nothing to do with how good or bad he is. It has to do with what other people think. And I also think that it is hard to divorce yourself if you do live in the same place as the election
Hmm.
happening. For most people, it's hard to get rid of your own opinions, not only your opinions, your friends' opinions, your family's opinions, your neighborhood, what people are talking about. I mean, that's information, but it's a very small amount of the information that goes into determining the election.
So when you are finding an opportunity that you think is positive and you want to bet, is that subjective on your part, or do you have a model? Or is that just, reading the room?
It can be either. I mean,
Hmm.
it can be either. I guess an example would be the vice president, the Democrat vice president this year, not the guy who's actually the vice president, but the market.
Hmm.
I had some data that wasn't publicly available
Hmm.
about that race, and which suggested that Shapiro was going to be the nominee. So I was able to get Shapiro at a low price. It went up to something like 75, 80 cents.
Hmm.
And I did trade out of that, as it turns out. Luckily, but for reasons that are, I think that I think is important to get to, which is the concept of uncertainty in betting in general, but especially in politics. But I traded out of that, and that was good, especially given that he didn't get it. Although I thought that he probably would. But what I was betting on there was not that I don't know I actually never heard of him. But the information I had suggested that a lot of people who were in positions of influence
Hmm.
believed that he was going to be the vice president. So that kind of is more of a subjective thing where that suggests where the price is going to go. It doesn't tell us that it's in any way right, but it means that maybe that price is going to go up, and that's actually what ended up happening. So I think that that's one anecdotal example, but that's very different than modeling, where you're trying to take in all of the polls, you're trying to take in demographics and voter registrations and things like that.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people, there's a lot of people who do that now, and I think that for me, that's usually how I would approach things like sports, because I'm a more mathematical,
Hmm.
mathematically inclined person, statistically inclined person. That's where I find my advantage. That's not really where I find my advantage in politics, because I would say, well, quite honestly, I think there's people who put more time into it than me, and so could I come up with a better model than them? I don't even want to say yes or no, but let's assume the answer is yes.
Hmm.
But how much better would it be? Would it be 1% better, 2% better? It's probably not going to be and better enough for all the time that it's going to take for me to do that. So I think that the key is to really, take what's out there, which I think is true in all things, take the information that's already out there and try to massage it, try to figure out um, how to bet with it. And so that's something that we were talking before we started about Nate Silver 538. So one of the things that I have done in the past is I was comparing the 538 model to PredictIt, or to the
Hmm.
prices on PredictIt. So what I found was PredictIt was better, okay, slightly better. So people overinterpret that to say, well, people just want there's people who are friends with Nate Silver. They want him to be good at what he does. Okay.
Hmm.
He is good at what he does, but it doesn't mean you can just take his numbers and beat a market, right? Anybody who models sports should know that. So, you know, on the one hand, I'm showing that the numbers that they spit out aren't enough. On the other hand, if you know how to bet, you can use those numbers and definitely make money off of the markets, because you're bringing in additional knowledge about how the markets work. And that's the key to betting anything, right? It's not having the model is, one step, but knowing how to bet it is way more important
Oh,
than
for
knowing how to
sure.
create the model,
Yeah.
right? So I think that that's, true in politics. It's true in anything.
Is there somewhere that you look and you're like, wow, this is really sharp. I think these are closest to what the market should be.
Well, first of all, interesting thing is that Nate Silver is not 538 anymore.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
Two separate things,
Oh,
and
okay.
that
Thank you.
actually is something that has kind of been interesting this election cycle, because Nate Silver's kind of been criticizing 538 pretty heavily
Oh,
because
okay.
their model has become garbage, basically. You can read his words, not mine, but
Yeah.
um, but no, I think that if you're talking about polls, something like 538 or Silver's analysis is going to get you 95% of the way there.
Mhm.
Um, so I would say that is, from a modeling polls perspective, that's where I would look. I wouldn't just base my decision on that alone, because
Right.
that's not enough. You know, it, it's kind of it's common sense to anybody who does this stuff. But if you go to 538 and it says that right now Harris is a 60% chance to win, and the market says she's a 50% chance, what do you do? Right? I mean, because is the market right, or is you have to know how to use that information, and in some cases it's going to be right, and in some cases it's just one piece of a puzzle. You have to be able to
Mhm.
piece it together. And to look at a source that's publicly available and to just blindly follow it, I mean, I think that you know
Yeah, you're probably not going to win a lot of money doing that. Do you think there's a lot of insider trading? Do you think a lot of people have inside information who are trading?
um I, yes, a lot of people, this that, I have no idea how many or who or what, but
Mhm.
there's definitely inside information in politics.
I guess more so than, you know, the NBA. Well, and also, I mean, there are regulations where if you work for the NBA, whatever, you can't bet. So I was reading the rules on Predict It, and I didn't see anything about that. I didn't see anything about if you work for a campaign, if you work for a polling place that you can't bet. So,
I think that technically, oh, that's actually, yeah. So there's laws that say that you can't bet if you are a if you're like a senator
mhm.
or somebody connected to that, if you work for a senator, there are laws in place that
Oh,
say that.
okay.
But PredictIt is not supposed, it doesn't have to enforce those laws. So
Mhm.
there's that. Now, if you work for a polling place, I don't think there's anything saying that you, so I mean, that would be a way to a potential opportunity, right? Because you know
Yeah.
the poll is going to be released in an hour and you know what it's going to say, and you
Mhm.
obviously have information. I mean, if you worked for a news organization
Yeah.
and you knew, we're covering the RFK dropout later, well, then that means he's dropping out, and maybe nobody knows that, or a few people know that. Information is out there, it just trickles in slowly. There's been some cases that I've had information, inside, quote unquote, inside information, and yeah, you can trade on, you can make money off of that. It's, again, it's not, well, I think that you can, some people might be able to make that systematic. I that's not what I do, but yes, I mean, if your friend is running for Senate, or a family member is running for president, I mean,
Mhm.
that's a pretty rare occurrence maybe, but you know there there's 538, well, there's however many House of Representatives, something like
Okay.
438, and there's 100 senators, and then there's
Mhm.
governors, and then there's, so, if you really wanted to connect yourself to people involved in political campaigns, this and that and the other thing, you could do it,
Mhm.
and it might only be a matter of time before you come across some information that's useful.
I'm imagining working in a newsroom on election day is kind of like court siding. Like if you're right before, the results come in,
Yeah.
if you have access, that would be pretty strong.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think that yeah, and I think that that's what, I mean, even, I mean, so there's that, and I think that obviously most of those people are, I would say probably all of them, or all but one or two,
mhm.
are are very likely not doing that. They're doing their jobs instead. But what that does tell you, though, is that there's enormous value in just being first to the information, and I still think a lot can be, there's a lot of edge to be had, and I think a lot of traders still make really a living basically off of sitting on Twitter and knowing the accounts to follow and seeing the news come across first and trading it before anybody gets to it. I happened, I mean, I happened to see, the assassination. I happened to, somebody messaged me like immediately because they happened to be watching it. And then I turned on TV and I saw, wow, okay. So what do I do? I immediately went to check the markets, but I also went to Twitter to see like what's everyone saying about this. And it was at least 15 or 20 minutes before anything showed up about the assassination on Twitter. So, the information, it's not like things just instantaneously,
Yeah.
or, surprise, somewhat surprising in today's world, but there is still, some time if you're on top of this stuff.
Yeah, it's like being on top of like injury information.
And
Um,
I think the thing about, with politics, or, with politics, is that it's a long game. It's a 2 year election. And for on a given day, it's really very boring. I mean, if you look at the past couple of weeks,
mhm.
it goes up, goes down. It's really the market doesn't move, and so it's so boring that you just don't pay attention. You have to stay, if you're staying on top of waiting for that information to drop, then that's where you get an edge, right? I mean, you sit around, you watch. What do? You watch. Do you watch every Trump rally? I mean, it gets pretty repetitive, but then the one where something happens, you're on
Yeah.
top of it before anybody else. And that's true not only of Trump rallies, it's true of anything on the news or anything, so there's a lot of edge to be had. There's also a lot of work that goes into getting that edge. So I think that it kind of goes hand in hand.
Um, what happened to people who bet on Biden? Just Biden to win outright, or
And
did they just lose? That's
I think they lost. I mean, unless there was something special about, but I think they lost. Yeah.
wow. Um, Okay, let's switch the conversation. I saw that you've been newly active on your YouTube channel, like really active, and you're putting up all these videos. They're labeled first course in probability. Like, what prompted you to become active again on YouTube?
Um, well, actually, you just said something. Let me just say something real quick because I think
Yeah.
it's relevant, and then I'll mention the YouTube. The people who lost on Biden. I mean, that's why. So I've put some stuff. That's so I put some stuff on Twitter recently about, some model projections, and people don't like the fact that I don't add the probabilities up to one. There's some extra probability laying around.
Mm,
That's it's something that I do. Apparently other people don't do it. I was surprised to hear that, because I thought it was kind of a standard thing. But it's accounting for the fact that the model can only account for so many things. So an example was, let's say, right now I might probably have, let's say Trump 48%, Harris 40%, and then that's it. And so where's the other 12%? Well, one of the things, it's still what, August, so you've got September, October, a little bit of November. My premise. So one of the things that, my approach, and other people have different approaches or different philosophies, but for me, if I can avoid placing a bet, I win that bet. So the name of the game is volume.
mm,
But if you can have a high volume, but then cut 10% out, that's not good. Then you've just improved everything. Well, and generally speaking, time is the enemy. Not only because there's time value to the money. So if you have a 3% edge on a
mm.
political race right now, it's pointless. Based just on putting it, you can put it in the
Interest
bank.
rates. Yeah.
You know, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is only bad things can happen when time. I mean, really, only bad things can happen. And that's not because good things can't happen. They can, but statistically, when you're fitting a model, when you're using statistics and data, if your assumptions are that your assumption, you make assumptions, and your assumption is that your assumptions are correct. And uncertainty and time can only make those assumptions wrong. What's an example of that? An example is that how much of your price, how much of your projection, your probability is pricing in the fact that Trump could get assassinated? Well, as of July 13th, I don't know. Some people might have had a 1% chance on that, but
Mm,
I'm guessing a lot of people just ignored that because they're saying it's so remote, it's not going to happen. How many people were, pricing in, well, Biden's the nominee,
mm,
because it's so remote that it'll happen. But these are things that happen. And then what else could happen between now and November is really hard. I think there are so many things that can happen that are kind of beyond comprehension, and I think that politics lends itself to that, especially because if you go back and you look 100 years, 100 years worth of elections into the
mm.
past, there's a lot of crazy stuff that's happened. Dewey beats Truman. There was that where the news actually reported the wrong person winning, and getting back to the rules that could affect,
Oh, right.
that's happened within the past 100 years. That's only 25 elections. So it's like basing your data on 25 game sample of, any sport would be
Mm,
considered ridiculous, right? So, there's just not that much information, but there's a lot of time. So I think there's a tendency to think, well, there hasn't been an assassination in 60, 70 years, so that's not going to happen. Well, it's really not that much time in the presidential, scale of time. So I think the uncertainty is something that really gets overlooked, and is especially true in politics, but it's true in all sports. It's just that the time elapse, I think,
mhm.
I think adds to it.
I'm surprised you just gave an example like you give, I don't know who you said, like maybe Harris 48, Trump 40. And so there's 12% there that you're accounting for, you know, the the random thing that could happen. Or I guess the field. It's like betting on the field. And are you saying that other people don't look at it that way? They're just like there's two
It's not
sides
on
to
the
it?
field. I mean, I would venture pretty, if you wanted to bet me, that the president will either be Trump or Harris, that would be close to 100%.
Hmm.
It's just that 12% is I don't know where to put it. I don't know. Does it belong to Trump? Does it belong to Harris? 50-50,
Hmm.
do you split it among them? Because of things like, how accurate are the polls today versus the polls,
Oh, I
in
see.
November? How much information is going to come out? What's going to happen? What scandal is going to drop in October? We know it's going to happen. What is it? Who's it going to hurt? Who's it going to help? And, you know, I can't, in a mathematical sense, if you had data, you could theoretically model, well, it's 60% more likely to hurt Harris than Trump, and so I adjust the probabilities accordingly. Well, how am I don't have a way of coming up with that 60% number. I wouldn't trust my assessment over anybody else's. So that's kind of where, that's just my limitations. And I think
Hmm.
you obviously have to bet within your own limitations. There are qualitative handicappers, qualitative bettors out there who are just really good at this stuff. Again, it's just
Okay.
not my thing.
So you're leaving a 12% cushion for like uncertainty. Is that a better way to say it?
Yeah, right now. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that
or
12%
yeah.
will go away, will
Hmm.
erode as time goes on. I mean, even in a typical setting, if we're talking about a basketball game that's going to happen and, later tonight, I mean, there
Hmm.
might be a 0.5% or whatever cushion, a 1%, and depending, I mean, if it's a situation where the main player might be injured, might not, that might have a bigger cushion.
Hmm.
Or or that's actually a case where you could argue that you could technically model it. But again, I think that that's where these are all things that can, in some sense, be tested in that domain, and you can come up with the right approach one way or the other. And for me, and with political stuff, I don't know how to allocate that, so I leave it out. And I'd rather not place a bet right now
Hmm.
than place one that I'm stuck with anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole conversation, just to recap, you made me think about things differently. One, we're basically betting on the voters, not the candidates. And the second one is that, it's 2 years of live betting. Like I just wasn't thinking of it that way, but it makes perfect sense. So I appreciate learning new things.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Glad somebody agree. So I'm glad somebody took some value from what I said. But the other thing I think is, if I would ask the question is, what edge would you need to have today? First of all, you'd have to be able to quantify your edge, but
Hmm.
assuming you could do that, let's say you knew you had a 10% edge on a candidate right now. Would you bet it? I mean, what edge do you need to have to make it worth it? Because, you're locking up whatever you do. You're
Right.
locking up either liquid money or credit or some kind
Hmm.
of liquidity that you could churn, even if you're churning it at a turning it over at a 1% edge between now and then, you could turn over 100 times.
Hmm.
Um, but you're stuck with, a one-time thing over the next at least 2.5 months, could be longer. So,
Yeah.
I think that I just think there's a lot more to think about when you get into these longer term things and into these um, qualitative type situations.
Yeah. Plus the fees. I wouldn't want to lock my money up thinking that I have a 10% edge because there's so much gray area. But if I could find a rule here and a rule there that are completely different, and I know that I have an edge betting both sides or whatever, I feel like that's stronger at
Hmm.
this point. I could be wrong. I could be completely saying this wrong, but from everything you've said, this is what I'm gathering.
I think that for better, well, at the very least, and
Hmm.
I think that you know political stuff, first of all, people get distracted. I'm one person. I get distracted by this stuff every 4 years, and then I don't pay attention for four more years. So
Hmm.
if I'm going to get distracted by it, I might as well get something out of it. So what are the things you can get out of it? I think being put it's a slightly different domain than you're probably used to if you're a traditional sports bettor. What are some of the differences that exist? And sometimes finding those differences, you can bring them back into the thing you're more familiar with, and you say, well, this is something that people over in politics thinks about. Maybe there's something that nobody's thinking about over here in sports that I could, kind of do something similar. So I
Hmm.
think that it's very easy to kind of get stuck in this rut of just thinking the same things all the time, and you never learn anything new. And so I think that, one of the things I'm always trying to do is just to try to make sure that I'm, staying sharp, right?
Hmm.
For lack of a better term. So I think this does provide that opportunity in addition to kind of just being distracted.
Right. And sweating the game.
To the videos on YouTube, so I teach a probability course at a school,
Mhm.
and and so I figured I've been teaching this for a number of years, so I had some material, and I figured maybe I'll put it out there, put it on YouTube, and for one, it could help the people who actually take this course because the material will actually be there. They don't have to, they might be able to watch the videos more than one time, and in a traditional lecture, you go and you write stuff on the board, and people leave, and so that's one thing. But the other thing is, maybe this is something that other people might be interested to learn. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, I don't know if you've watched the videos. It's pretty dry,
Yeah.
yeah,
I I
but it is what it is. It's a math course,
mhm.
for all intents and purposes.
And I most of the videos that you have up are under 30 minutes, and a lot of them, half of them are under 15 minutes. And I appreciate that because my attention span for anything math related is just not that long. And I can rewatch them, but watching a 15-minute video is not overwhelming, at least for me. So I appreciated that.
Well, I'm yeah, glad people seem to be, people seem to be enjoying it. I don't know about enjoying it, but some people seem to be watching them, and
Yeah.
it's a grind if you're going to go through everything. There's something like 130 or 140 videos. So,
Hmm.
um, but if you've never taken a probability class and you think that it might help you, then maybe there's something in there.
Yeah.
Or at the minimum, maybe it's a reference of to a, something in the future comes out, you can refer back to that. I think that that's something that I think is important I think I don't know. You've had a longer career than me in this, so however many decades. But I'd be curious to know, something that I've seen, is, and I talk about that, this is true of politics, it's true of things in sports as well. I might, I might not. Okay, I did some stuff with the vice president thing. That's over now. I might not put in
Hmm.
place another bet on this election. And I'm perfectly fine with that. The thing that might end up materializing for me in politics, first of all, it might never happen. Or it might be 8 or 10 years from now that, something happens that, and I'm ready for it. And, if you have enough of those open loose ends, then one of them might be inclined to, you'll find your way to one of them eventually over time. But, you know, I think having the options open, I think is something that is valuable. I guess I
Oh,
would
for
say.
sure. For sure. It's like gambling or advantage play. Like if you don't have more tools in your tool belt, you're out of a job eventually. Like you know one thing, well, that thing dies. Now what are you going to do? So I think you're saying something like that.
Well, yeah, and you also know that, these aren't like, it's not like you see something, some in politics especially, but yeah, politics especially. It's not like, you might find something to make a couple grand in a couple of years. These are big, you
Yeah,
know. So it's very lumpy. It's very unlikely, quite frankly, to happen. But if it does happen, it's worth it, right? So, but in order to be in the game, you have to have,
years.
you have to have accounts ready, for quite frankly, you have to have money in accounts that's ready
Yeah,
to go because you might only have a minute, to do it. So there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of knowledge that goes into it. There's a lot of things like that. Or the flip side of it being, you might learn something over here that later you figure out can help you out over there. And it's all part of one kind of big game as I think about it.
yeah. I think gambling, professional gambling in general, is exactly that. I've learned things 20 years ago that were recycled into something that I'm doing now. I'm doing it maybe a little bit differently, but because I learned it 20 years ago, it's like, okay, cool. Here's an opportunity. I'm ready because I already have this knowledge.
Yeah.
I know you have to go soon, but I wanted to ask you real quick about Analytics.bet. Are you still doing that? And what is it?
Analytics.bet. Yeah, we're still
Mhm.
doing it. It's so these are courses that we've made, we developed a curriculum basically to help people who want to get a leg up in raising their game in
Mhm.
sports betting. So there's quite a few courses on there on model building, bankroll management, some technical stuff. Technical. What I mean by that is what people would usually call top down, bottom up. I would call technical versus fundamental modeling, using the market driven versus model driven betting. We talk about all that. We give some pretty in depth treatment of the core concepts that are needed to kind of take somebody who's maybe a semi-professional, doing it on
Mhm.
the side, making a little bit of money, take them to the next level. Some people are already professionals. They want to, again, keep expanding their toolkit so
Mhm.
that they're ready to continue to evolve as the game evolves. So we have courses up. There's about 7 or 8 courses up there, and on everything from model building, model evaluation, back testing, bankroll management, kind of some bet strategies, and also technical data science type stuff, using APIs and some pretty technical stuff that can building bots, things like that.
Mhm.
And yeah, so they're available on the website, Analytics.bet.
Nice.
Um, and yeah, so it's
Okay.
been good.
And then YouTube is at Harry D. Crane. And is that your Twitter also?
That's also the Twitter. Yeah.
Okay. So if anybody wants to follow Harry, it's Harry D. Crane at Twitter and YouTube. And thank you for talking to me. I appreciated this.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Gina.
And thank you for listening. I hope you found value in this conversation with Harry. I went into the discussion thinking about betting on politics completely backwards, and he really did open my eyes to very simple concepts that hopefully I can apply to something in the future. Please like this podcast, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And of course, check out unabated.com. If you sign up for a demo to explore the Unabated tools, they will give you a 5-day free trial. The link is in the bio. Have a great day.